Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. This is another video on the MercedUI library I made. Just to recap, basically this is originally what started out was going to be a component library. I was going to create standard web components, and there's still two of them in there, the card and the container library you probably saw in the previous video, and I might go through them again. But I ended up making a bunch of functions that really kind of give this a lot more power to one, make your own components, so abstracting over the web component API, so that way you don't have to go through all that boilerplate setup. And I was just creating some functions that create some reactivity, whatnot, almost making it not quite a framework, but giving you enough functionality to get a framework-ish type workflow for your UI, especially if you don't want to necessarily use, if you want to make use of the native web component API, but you just want something to make it a little bit easier. This may be your go-to, hopefully. That'd be really cool. So let's walk through it, okay? So again, the documentation's all there. You can go on GitHub, look up MercedUI, and you'll find it. But I'll show you how some of these things work. So we're gonna create another new project. Or actually, let's use the project we had before, right over here. Okay, so just first, I'm just gonna empty out the HTML. So start from scratch. Okie dokie. And again, there's a CDN link. So you'll find the link for the CDN in the documentation, but it's a pretty easy URL to remember. All you need to do is bring that up, link your JavaScript file. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And then I'm going to open up the app.js right here. We're going to empty this out, start from scratch. And I'm going to show you some of the newer things I added since the last video, and then I'll go over some of the things from the previous video. First, I want to show you how to make your own component using the function I made. Okay, just called makeComponent. Okay, so basically the way it works is that makeComponent essentially just does all the boilerplate for you. And basically, what I need you to do is just pass in the strings to fill in the parts that you need filled in. And then you can just ignore all the other boilerplate and your HTML tag is born. So basically that's the function makeComponent. You just pass in an object. The three things you do need are prefix. Okay, so we'll just say test component. Okay, and these have to be strings. Everything's got to be a string. Prefix, name, which is the name of your component. Okay, so we'll call this comp, meaning test component. Okay, and basically what it does is it's going to hyphenate these two. That's going to be your HTML tag, because you have to hyphenate for web components to avoid collisions. So it's going to end up being test-comp. Okay, and then the last piece is the template. Okay, and then I will just, I'll use backticks, and then this could just be whatever you want. Okay, so we'll just keep it simple right now. H1 hello world. Okay, but I mean, I can go, basically what you would do is you would just create your HTML template, and if you want to do any internal styling, you would just do some style tags to style it. So I will do that too in my template. Style, and we'll say that H1 is orange, because this is going to take advantage of the shadow DOM, so you don't need to worry about setting it up. It's just automatically going to be set up, so you're going to make sure you style stuff here, because your external style sheets won't apply to it. So style the H1, we're going to say the color is orange. Cool. Okay. And then there's my template. So I'm going to hit save. And then that's it. The component's done. There's other things you can do. Like, it's all in the documentation. There's a bunch of other properties you can add to that object that will help you construct your component and pretty much make it as customizable as you want. Literally, you have access to the full web component API. But notice again, this is a lot less code than what you would normally have to do. So just to give you an example, if I'm using the full-on API from scratch, making a component, let me show you like the code for one of these components. Essentially, this is all the code for the container component in the library. It's not bad, and it's fairly boilerplatey. So once you've done it once, you just kind of copy and paste it and make your next component. But if you can make it simpler, why not? So I did. So I've extracted all that, and it becomes just this. This isn't too bad. Okay, so now let's actually test it out, see if the component works. So let's go into our HTML, Okay, in the HTML, the HTML element should be the prefix test dash, then the name, so test dash comp and slash test comp. Okay, save. Okay, so now let's go open this up in our show in file manager. Open with Google Chrome. Okay, that didn't quite show up yet, so let's investigate as to why. Invalid or unexpected token at makeComponent 173. Oh, I remember why. Wait a second. No. MakeComponent 173. So let's see why. App. I might have to fix the library as we speak. It was working a second ago, but I did make a change, so I might have just broke it. 173. Eval string. Okay, so then the issue should probably be with my code here. So let's see here, template. That's a string, that's a string. I'm gonna just change these back into just a normal quotation mark for now. Why did that break? Interesting. Okay, what if we do this? Control X. I'm gonna put that in here. That coloration isn't right, so that means there's something funky here. H1 color style. I mean, that's how a style tag works. And H1 hello world. That's how that works. And then we have we close our object. There is certainly something I am missing here. Yeah, here we go. No, thank you, prettier. Let's see. Undetermined string constant. Okay, I guess it's just a spacing issue. There we go. We'll probably just that. Yep, and that works. Okay, so there you go. So you see, hello world. Okay, neat. Yeah, so you made a component. Now I can use that as many times as I want. So I can go back to my HTML, and I can copy this over and over again. Hello world. See, that's pretty neat. Okay. And if I want to include a slot, okay, so let's say one of the, because that way I can put children, I'll just put like slot over here. There we go. Save. Okay, and then now going forward, if I were to do something like this, let me go back to the HTML. Now if I put this here, H3, hello world, oh, hello goodbye, slash H3. Okay, so if you're not familiar with it, the way web components work is that when you put a child in a web component, it will, if the web component's template has a slot in it, which was that slot tag that I put in there, this right here, that's where the children will show up. So basically that H3 should show up there under the hello world. So let's try it out. And see, it's only on the first one, because again, each one is independent. There are web components, and each one's a separate instance of that web component. Very cool. See, that was very easy. And then all you have to do is put in the The setup was even simpler than React. You don't have to do any kind of weird React DOM or any of that. You just literally put in the CDN and you could start making components. How easy is that? Okay, cool. Now, if you wanted to use other things like do other like sort of fancy things, they're there. Like for example, if you wanted to put more code inside the connected callback function, you would just do another property called connected. And I gotta make sure I put a comma on the last one. Okay, another property is connected, and I would put that string there. And then there's an other property where basically you can define anything else. So literally, if you wanted to define also other methods, sometimes I'll put like a toggle method on my components, which actually the two components that are built into this library have that. Literally anything you want, you could just put in this string. If you wanted to use the any of the other callbacks, so disconnected callback, adopted callback, and attribute changed callback, you could just put that code in here, because technically this code gets placed right after at the very end of the class definition. And then this, and then also if you wanted to use like basic, it's all there. So if you read the documentation, but basically without having to know much about the actual web components API, literally you can just build components just like that. You just name it, put your template, and now you have yourself an HTML tag. You can just plop wherever you want. Okay, very neat, very simple. Okay, so another thing I did is I created something called a rotator. Okay, so first what we need is so what I'm going to do is first we're going to delete these. We'll come back to that. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to create an object, and we're going to have several different things, several different elements. One moment. Okie dokie, the sounds have calmed down. So let's see here. So I want to create an object, and actually we should probably say that in a variable. Okay, so we'll just call this my rotations, or const rotations. And think of my we're going to be creating a rotator, and the rotator is pretty much like a router in like React or Angular, where you can kind of switch between different things, except it's not really switching between components, and it really you'll see it's a little bit different. Const rotations equals, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna just create 3 little mini templates. So we'll just name the first one 1, okay, and 1 we'll just put in here. This will just be a test comp, just so that we can see that we can even use our custom components inside this. Test comp. This is cool. I'll just make it say 1. Keep this simple. / test comp. Okay, and then we're gonna do 2 more of those. Control C. Okay, and we'll just do 2. 3. And essentially, when this is all said and done, you can kind of use this as like a router to make a single page application. 2, 1. How you construct the object doesn't matter. The idea is that you have an object with strings of templates with property names. Cool. And then once we have that, we're going to use the function. Let's go back to the documentation. See what remember the function syntax that was earlier today. So already slipping my mind. Map to string. Yes, so should be right before this. createRotator. Okay, so we already have the rotations. Okay, we're just going to attach it to the body. So here we go. Const createRotator. That's the function, which returns a function. Okay, so let me go back to my code for this particular example. So what we're going to do is we're going to do const rotate, because we're going to have a function called rotate that allows us to switch between these different views or these different templates. Okay, const rotate equals create rotator. The first parameter is rotations, which is our different views. And the second parameter is the element that we're going to attach this to. So I'm just going to do document dot query selector body. Okay, so we're just going to connect it to the body. Cool. So then what this does, it's going to return this function here. And now I'm going to have this function that I can use to do whatever. So first what I'll do is I'll just run the function right away, rotate, and then you pass in which view you want visible. So I'm going to say 1. Okay, so if I save that, save. Let's go back over here. 1. Okay, so there's that one view. Okay, and then let's change that to 2. 2. 3. Okay, and then 3. Cool. So you can almost use it like a router, and you can create as many of these rotators as you want, name them whatever you want. But imagine that, you know, you have several different pages in your single page application, and you define them all into different strings, and then just put all those strings in an object, pass them into a rotator, tell it what element you want to attach them to, and voila, you can just rotate through them using the rotator. Easy peasy. Okay, and you can use all your created components as long as they're defined beforehand. Okay, so see, it's pretty neat. Okay, we're starting to get very frameworky. So those are the two sort of newest pieces, and I'm pretty happy with how those pieces work, especially when you think about how easy it is to just add the CDN line, and ta-da, you have access to all this. And it's really, again, I think this whole library is less than 200 lines of code. And this makes it working with standard web components much easier. So again, you don't have to sit there and bring in a whole library. So bundle below is a lot less, but you're still getting a lot of those sort of cool features built in. Now, a couple of the other ones that we had was mapToDom. So let's walk through the whole mapToDom deal again. So we need to make an array. So const my array, okay, equals Alex Merced. That's me. Okay. Claudio Sanchez, lead singer of Coheed and Cambria, and Freddie Mercury, lead singer of Queen. Cool. So what I want to do is create elements with this array. So how could I do that? Okay, and I'm going to get rid of this rotate piece here. I'm not going to need that right now. Okay. Oh, living on a busy street corner means lots of sirens, so I'm going to pause for a second. Okie dokie. Okay, Alex Merced, Claudio Sanchez, Freddie Mercury. Now what I want to do is I want to map this to the DOM. Okay. So the way I do this is I go to map to, the function is called mapToDom. Okay, and the very first parameter is the array. That's the array I want to map to the DOM. And the second thing is a function, is a callback function, very similar to your callbacks for higher order functions. So if you're used to like filter, map, etc., this should feel very familiar. So value index, and what I'm going to do, then what you need to do is return a string, because what it's going to do is going to concatenate them into one big block of HTML. So I'm going to return a string. And then the string just basically is, we're going to use our created component again, just to keep illustrating that we can use these components that we made above. Okay, /dest comp, and then in the middle we are going to interpolate our data, just standard JavaScript interpolation, value, cool. Okay, and yeah, that's basically that. So again, we're going to do this array. We're going to run this function on each array and concatenate the results, and then it gets appended, or actually becomes the inner HTML of whatever element I put in as a next argument, which we'll use. I'll just use the body, and I'll just copy the same thing here. Okay. So now when I do that, save. Okay. And there we go. See, it mapped it over there. Cool. So that's cool. I can map an array of data really easily to the DOM, okay, using that function, and create all sorts of cool, fun HTML along with it. Very nice. But right now the data doesn't react, okay? Basically, if for some reason I changed the array, the data wouldn't change. So how to do that? So we did do that, okay? We created a function called dataBind. So literally I can just replace this with bindData, okay? Basically it does the same thing. The only difference is that it returns a function. So at the end of running this the first time, it returns a function for future updates. So I need to capture that function. So we're going to say constant update data equals bindData. Okay. So now we're going to create a function. And basically what you do is you're going to use, I will just pass it in a whole new array. So here's what I will do. Save. We're going to create a button in our HTML. The only problem is the button will not exist right now as I have it right now. So what I need to do is change this a little. I'm going to create a div. Because the way this works is that it's going to replace the HTML. So if I put the button in there, the minute it renders that array, it's going to clean out the body. So I need to render that to a div instead. So we're just going to create that div, keep this real simple. I'm not going to play with IDs and stuff right now. Div. Let's just make sure that still works. Yep, still works. Good. Okay, but now I can create the button, because I can create the button outside of that div. So I'm going to create the button, and the button will have an onClick event, and when it's on click, it's going to use that update data function and pass in a new array of 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be the new, it basically swaps out, it replaces the data. It's kind of like set state in React. Okay, and kind of like set state in React, it's going to then cause a re-rendering of that array. The only difference is not part of a component, it's just a functional rendering that you're redoing. Save. Okay, well actually first I gotta finish the button. So click me. Save. Okay. Now let's bring this back up. Okay, so now if I, right now it says we have the original version of the array. So now when I click on this, it should change to 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's what it is. So I click it, when I run that update me function, it replaces the data with the new data and then reruns the map to the DOM. Okay? But the cool thing is that once I have that update data, I can use it as many times as I want. So if this information is going to be updating very regularly, it just becomes very easy, really minimizing a lot of that code, kind of like using set state in React. But again, we don't have to worry about all the React boilerplate. There's very minimal, if any, boilerplate here. Okay. Very nice. Okay. Now there are still certain patterns in React that I still haven't perfectly, or really in any of these libraries that I haven't perfectly replicated, but sort of one of the most of the killer features we have, the ability to create components, the ability to have sort of reactive stuff. Okay, and then because you can use the full web component API, you do have the lifecycle functions available to you, the way I designed the makeComponent function, and you can use, and then technically the web component API has a lot of those features in it, and I've made those features accessible through the abstraction I made, but does require you to kind of already understand the underlying API to really take full advantage of it. Cool. Let's see here. Now one more piece is what happens is that, hey, if you want to use the rotator, you may want to map an array to a string that's in a property in that object, so that way you can use it in a rotator. So there's a function called mapToString, which does literally the exact same thing. So if I go back to app.js and I go here where I did, where is it? bindData, this could instead be mapToString, and it'll do the same thing. The only difference is that it's going to return a string, not a function. Okay, so if I console.log update data, mapToDom doesn't return anything as a side note. mapToDom just renders that array to the DOM based on your function. Okay, but if I do this, there you go, and see there's the text. You can see we iterated and then concatenated the result of running that code each time on your thing. Then I click here again. Oh, yeah, that's right, because I changed that. Okay. Cool. And the point of map to string is really just to make it easier to use to create your objects for the rotator. Because if you want to dynamically generate the values inside those objects, you can do so and generate a string from it. Only thing I haven't done yet, which I'm debating whether I should or can do, is kind of create like a version of bindData that just returns the string, but it's not. There's no way to kind of automatically. I'll have to figure out a way maybe to update the object that's in your rotator automatically. But I think that's something you could probably just do on a project by project basis, because probably different situations are going to call for a different flow of how that's done. So probably keeping it in separate pieces may be more flexible for when it's needed. I'm still thinking that through. But basically, you can do most things. Again, we can iterate over data. Okay, and again, if you don't need to pull API data, you can just pull it with your normal fetch API. You don't have to worry about really any scoping issues here, like basically the functions kind of do what you need them to do. Again, no boilerplate. Just splash in a little bit of knowledge about plain vanilla DOM manipulation with these functions, and life's okay. So I'm pretty happy with how this is turning out. Hopefully you guys play around with it and have some fun with it. The cool thing about it is, since it's using the standard web components API, it's fairly future-proof. There's not this huge girth of code, and then you can pretty quickly kind of understand what's going on under the hood to, use it in a very flexible way. So very neat. I'm happy. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. Have a great day and enjoy.